Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aline McNall, and I'm a Senior Legislative Representative at IEEE-USA. I'll be doing this afternoon's Washington update. For those of you who might be new, we give these updates every 2 weeks, so please feel free to tune in 2 weeks for another update. For today's update, it is live, so if you have questions, you can put them in the comments section, and I will address them at the end of the talk. So an update on budget discussions in Washington. Now that we have a deal, the appropriators can actually start working on their 12 bills. So this includes the defense as well as the R&D as well as an energy package. So those are three we follow pretty closely at IEEE. With respect to the defense budget, House appropriators are looking at the president's budget request and are debating whether or not to shift around a little bit of the funding priorities. We are hopeful for a strong and robust defense research and development budget, of course, and IEEE certainly advocates for 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 funding within that budget, but also we care about the whole RDT&E budget within the defense budget space. For R&D, we're looking at the NSF in particular because there would be significant cuts unless there's a supplemental budget package right now. And what IEEE is hopeful of is that the TIP directorate, the new directorate that became into fruition during the CHIPS Act debates, will hopefully receive its own budget line. An update on NIST. So NIST announced 5 leaders that will be joining the CHIPS Research and Development Office within CHIPS for America. So these are Laura Weiss, Eric Lynn, Neil Adderhoy, and Richard Dwayne Chambers, as well as Marla Dowell. Another thing NIST has recently released is their NIST cybersecurity framework. So it's a 2.0 document. They have an original cybersecurity framework, but this 2.0 is a discussion draft document, and they are seeking feedback on their framework 2.0. So for those of you who are interested in providing some feedback or reading the document, please feel free to reach out, and IEEE may or may not decide to have its own set of feedback, or we might just have our members who are interested in cybersecurity provide their feedback on their own. So that's currently a debate within the R&D committee, but we look forward to working with NIST on the cybersecurity framework. So an NSF update. So IEEE is, as I mentioned before, looking to get TIP, the Technology Innovation Partnership Directorate, its own funding line. Currently, budget discussions in Congress tend toward the overall NSF funding line, but because TIP is new and because it's becoming its own entity within NSF and certainly has its own programs and that sort of thing, we wanted to make sure that it was adequately funded. And so the debate is whether or not to have it have its own funding line in the budget bills that are coming through Congress. There was a community letter to Congress, which IEEE did endorse, which asked for funding of at least $9.8 billion for the NSF, and then did discuss the issue of supplemental funding because right now the NSF is looking at some cuts based on the budget discussions. An update on energy. House Science did have a fusion hearing recently. There's a lot of bipartisan support for fusion energy sciences, particularly the program of the DOE, the Department of Energy. And House Science also fully supports funding ITER. So we look forward to working with them and with the Department of Energy as fusion moves forward, particularly looking at Lawrence Livermore, but also the basic energy sciences that lead to those types of breakthroughs. An update on the quantum reauthorization process. So this is under discussion and certainly underway. It is a 5-year reauthorization, and the Department of Energy is currently holding meetings with stakeholders. So we have been in communication with them about the quantum programs at DOE, but also the quantum update does focus on, the quantum reauthorization does focus on other agencies as well. So I did want to mention that. But we have been working a lot with the Department of Energy on their quantum programs in particular. Quick update on space policy. Congress is looking at the weather satellites issues. So House Science held a hearing on weather satellites, particularly focused on weather data and how many different economic sectors do rely on weather data. So whether it's ag or whether it's a different part of our economy, how science is looking at how that data can really help the different economic sectors. They are looking to reauthorize the Weather Act, which addresses forecasting and weather research. So that's the reason behind the hearing, but also we look forward to seeing what happens in terms of the weather data issue. An update on defense policy. So the subcommittees had their marks in the House Armed Services Committee, and then the House Armed Services Chairman released his mark, or his version of the bill, yesterday. So IEEE is still, of course, looking through that bill. So if you have any questions about that, I might have to actually look at the bill text itself to answer those. But as we look through the bill, we are pleased to see that there's a space activities funding debate going on, and that RDT&E is well funded as it should be. But that's where a lot of the research funding that many of our members who work with the Department of Energy, that's where they get their research funding. And so we're hopeful that the RDT&E budget is as high as possible. IEEE did meet with AFOSR recently, so I wanted to update you all on that. The Air Force Office of Scientific Research is looking to partner with the STEM community in general and strengthen academic research capabilities, look at technology transition, workforce developments, help with research grants to focus on basic research, as well as expanding Air and Space Force academic research and strengthening research capabilities in general. So it was a really great discussion, and we look forward to helping them supporting their research projects, but also helping to connect our members with AFOSR. We do regularly meet with federal entities, but I did want to mention this one in particular since many of you are funded by that lab. So I'll take questions, comments, or wise remarks from any of you who are tuned in today. I see one from Brendan. So let's look at that one. Are substantial NSF cuts you mentioned relative to this year's appropriations or next year's presidential budget? So that would be relative to this year's appropriations. So we are hopeful that Congress does fund NSF as high as possible. Now these debates are certainly underway and are not finalized yet. So we are looking at being a part of those discussions and hoping that NSF does receive the strong bipartisan support it has received in the past for this year. So for those of you who are watching this after the broadcast has ended, my email is a.mcnall@ieee.org. So you could feel free to ask questions that way as well, should you wish to do so. I'm always happy to receive emails from listeners, and certainly happy to engage with any of you who are interested in these policy discussions.
I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE-USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE-USA is more than just a network. It's a family.